The Galactic Concord Hall was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling rose like a silent sky, layered with floating rings of light that drifted in slow circles. Tall columns, cut from pale crystal, held nothing and everything at once. The air smelled faintly of cold metal and clean rain. Every sound carried too far, as if the chamber wanted to remember every word that ever touched it. Daniel Mercer stood on the central platform, hands relaxed at his sides, trying not to look up. Looking up made it worse. Looking up made his thoughts scatter. He was not a soldier, not a hero. He was a systems analyst from Earth, someone who spent his days fixing broken schedules, cleaning messy data, and asking questions people hated because they were simple. Now those same questions had brought him here. A ring of judges floated above the platform, seated in smooth, hovering chairs that moved with quiet precision. Their bodies were different shapes, different sizes, and different colors, but their posture was the same: calm, controlled, superior. Behind them, rows of observers filled the shadowed benches, diplomats, advisors, scholars, and all the people who decided what civilized meant. Daniel's translator band warmed against his neck. It had already adjusted to the Concord's main language. The words came into his mind like they belonged there, which was unsettling. He wished it would leave him alone and let him misunderstand things the way a normal person would. "Daniel Mercer of Earth," the nearest judge said, voice smooth and slightly echoing. The judge's face had 4 eyes and a mouth that did not open much when it spoke. "You have been summoned under Concord Statute 9, Clause 2, cultural destabilization through improper conduct." Daniel swallowed. He kept his expression neutral, but his thoughts were not neutral at all. Improper conduct. That was the polite phrase for what had happened. He had spoken like a human being in a room full of people who treated words like weapons. He remembered the earlier meeting on Varen Station, his first time sitting across from the Concord's negotiation panel. Earth's representatives had come prepared with gifts, formal speeches, and carefully practiced deference. Daniel had been there because the station's resource allocation software kept breaking, and someone had decided the Concord would trust a technical neutral more than a diplomat. When the Concord officials asked why Earth shipments were late, Daniel had answered honestly. "Because your timetable makes no sense," he had said. He had even smiled a little, as if it were harmless. It had not been harmless. The room had gone cold. The diplomats had stared at him like he had just insulted a family member. A junior envoy had tried to rescue the moment by turning Daniel's statement into gentle suggestion, but Daniel had kept going, still thinking he was helping. "If you want consistent deliveries, you need flexible scheduling," he had explained. "You can't punish a system for reacting to reality. Weather happens, equipment fails, people get sick. The answer isn't tighter control, it's better design." He had not raised his voice. He had not mocked anyone. He had simply spoken, and that, it seemed, was the problem. The judge continued, "You have been accused of disrupting established protocol, undermining authority structures, and encouraging unsanctioned autonomy among junior staff." Daniel forced himself to breathe slowly. "I didn't encourage anything. I just answered the questions." A few observers shifted. A soft ripple moved through the benches like wind through long grass. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Your defense is that you did not understand the consequences of your words." Daniel hesitated. "No," he said carefully. "My defense is that the consequences shouldn't exist." Silence fell. Somewhere in the hall, a small device chimed once and then stopped, as if it had realized it was not allowed to make noise here. Daniel's human legal advisor, standing off to the side, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The judge leaned forward. "Explain." Daniel's heart beat too loudly. He knew he was walking into danger again. But the same part of him that fixed broken systems refused to stop when he saw a broken rule. "If a society treats basic truth as destabilizing," Daniel said, "then the society is already unstable. I didn't bring chaos. I brought information." Another judge, taller and draped in layered fabric that shimmered like oil, spoke next. "Information is never neutral." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then nothing is safe, not progress, not trust, not conversation. If every honest statement is a threat, you don't have peace. You have fear." The benches stirred again. The word fear seemed to stick in the air. The first judge tilted their head. "You speak as if fear is unusual." Daniel almost laughed, but he stopped himself. "I'm human," he said. "Fear is normal. But we don't build our whole culture around hiding from it. We argue, we fail, we fix things, and we keep going. That's how we survive." A low, slow murmur rolled through the hall. Daniel heard a few translator bands clicking softly as they struggled to render the meaning of his tone. The judges did not murmur. They were still watching, measuring. "And you believe," the first judge said, "that your species is uniquely suited to such disorder?" "No," Daniel said quickly. "Not uniquely, just practiced. We're young, we don't have centuries of polished tradition, we have messy history. We got used to living with contradictions. It makes us stubborn." The old shimmer judge raised a hand slightly. "Stubbornness is not a virtue." Daniel looked up at them. "It can be if it's attached to the right thing." The hall seemed to sharpen. Even the light rings overhead looked brighter. From the far end, a new presence entered, the Consul. Everyone knew which figure it was without needing an announcement. The observers straightened. Some bowed their heads. The judges rotated their chairs subtly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. The air itself felt like it became more careful. The Consul moved at a measured pace, accompanied by two attendants who carried nothing visible and yet acted as if they were guarding something priceless. The Consul's species was hard for Daniel to describe. They were tall with smooth skin marked by faint patterns like lines on marble. Their expression was calm, but their eyes were not calm. Their eyes were awake. The Consul took a place on a raised platform to the side, not among the judges, but above the idea of judges. The position alone made Daniel's neck prickle. The first judge spoke with extra precision now. "Consul Verley, your presence honors this proceeding." The Consul inclined their head. "Proceed," they said. The word was simple. It carried more weight than any speech Daniel had ever heard. The first judge turned back to Daniel. "Daniel Mercer of Earth, your conduct has resulted in a breakdown of protocol on Veyron Station. Junior officials have begun requesting clarification rather than obeying immediately. Delegates have challenged seating order. A negotiation session was delayed by 17 minutes due to a dispute over whether a lower-tier representative could speak without permission." Daniel blinked. "That sounds like people thinking." A wave of shock moved through the benches, sharper than before. Daniel's advisor made a small choking sound. The judge's voice cooled. "It sounds like erosion." Daniel spread his hands. "If it erodes because someone asked why, then it was built on sand." The Consul watched him without moving. The old shimmer judge spoke again. "You are accused of introducing human cultural habits into conquered structures." Daniel's mouth went dry. "I didn't introduce anything. People already have minds, I just treated them like it." The judges were quiet for a long moment. Then the first judge said, "Do you understand that the conquered exists to prevent chaos among hundreds of species?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." "And do you understand," the judge continued, "that your species is new, unpredictable, and often emotionally expressive in ways that other cultures find disruptive?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "Yes, I'm starting to understand that." The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why did you persist?" Daniel hesitated. He could give a strategic answer. He could say he had been ignorant, that he had made mistakes, that he regretted everything. He knew that was what they expected. He also knew it was not true. Because if it was true, he would not be Daniel. "Because," he said, "someone had to say it. Your system is impressive, it's huge, it's organized, but it's not alive, it doesn't bend, it doesn't listen. And if it can't bend, it's going to break someday." The hall was so quiet that Daniel heard his own breathing. The Consul's eyes did not leave him. The first judge drew back slightly, as if Daniel's words had a smell. "It is not your place to predict the conquered's future." Daniel looked at the judges and then at the Consul. "Then whose place is it? If no one is allowed to speak plainly, how do you ever see what's coming?" For the first time, one of the judges looked uncertain just for a flicker. Then it vanished. The Consul raised one hand. The judges fell silent immediately. "Daniel Mercer," the Consul said, voice calm and strangely gentle, "you speak as if honesty is simple." Daniel swallowed. "It's not always simple, it's just clearer." The Consul studied him. "Clear words can be dangerous." Daniel nodded. "So can unclear ones." A quiet, almost amused sound moved through the benches, quickly smothered as observers remembered where they were. The Consul's expression did not change, but something in the air shifted, like a door opening without anyone seeing it. The Consul turned to the judges. "This case has been framed as destabilization. I propose it be reframed as calibration." The first judge paused. "Consul," the Consul's gaze remained steady. The human's presence revealed weakness in our protocols. Weakness does not vanish because we punish the one who pointed at it. A heavy silence followed. Daniel felt as if he had stepped onto thin ice and someone had decided not to crack it. Yet, the old Shimmer judge spoke carefully. Even if that is true, Consul, the human cannot be left uncontained. His influence is abnormal. Agreed, the Consul said. He cannot be left to wander freely among developing minds. Daniel's stomach dropped. That sounded like a cage dressed in polite language. The Consul looked directly at Daniel. You are not under threat of harm, Daniel Mercer. You are under threat of consequence. Daniel's voice came out quiet. I'd prefer neither. Another ripple of reaction ran through the benches, but it was not fully negative now. Some sounded almost curious. The Consul continued, Your species is unusual. Humans are adaptable under pressure, socially resilient, and capable of forming bonds across difference. You do not require sameness to cooperate. You require willingness. Daniel's throat tightened. Hearing his species described like that in this place felt strange, almost like pride, but not quite. The Consul's voice remained even. That trait can be beneficial, it can also be disruptive. The first judge asked, What is your recommendation, Consul? The Consul turned slightly, and an attendant stepped forward. Behind the attendant, 3 figures waited at the edge of the hall, partially hidden by the curve of a column. Daniel noticed them only because they were watching him with intense focus. 3 young women, alien, but not in the way he expected. They were tall, elegant, with skin that shifted in soft shades under the lights. Their eyes were large, with a reflective depth. Each wore formal garments that looked like art, but their posture was not relaxed. It was controlled in the same way someone controls a trembling hand. They looked like people who had been taught their whole lives to never show fear. The Consul spoke, and the entire hall leaned inward without moving. Judgment will be passed, the Consul said. Daniel Mercer will be bound under conquered law as guardian companion to my granddaughters. The words fell like stones into water. For a moment, Daniel did not understand. Then his translator band warmed sharply, as if the meaning took effort to deliver. Bound. Guardian companion, the Consul's granddaughters. Daniel's mind scrambled. What? The first judge's voice was controlled but tight. Consul, that is not a standard sentence for destabilization. It is not a standard case, the Consul replied. The observers erupted into whispering despite themselves, a storm held behind thin walls of etiquette. Daniel stared at the 3 young women. They were not whispering. They were still as if they had expected this. The old Shimmer judge asked, What purpose does this serve? The Consul's eyes moved across the hall. Containment, they said, and education. Daniel's mouth went dry. Education for who? The Consul looked back at him. For you, human, and for them, and for the conquered if it dares to learn. Daniel's heart thudded. I didn't sign up to be part of anyone's experiment. You did not sign up to be here either, the Consul said, unkindly factual. Yet here you stand. Your choices have already shaped outcomes beyond your intent. The first judge tried again, voice careful. Consul, binding a human to your lineage may be seen as what? The Consul asked softly. The judge paused. As elevating him? The Consul's gaze was calm. Or as restricting him? Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. He understood then. This was not a reward. It was a controlled environment, a cage with silk curtains. He stepped forward half a pace, not thinking, only reacting. You're sentencing me to babysit royalty? A sharp intake moved through the benches. His advisor looked like he might faint. The Consul did not blink. You will not babysit. You will serve as protector, companion, and stabilizing presence. You will be responsible for their exposure to outside influences, and you will be held accountable for any unacceptable outcomes. Daniel's voice rose slightly before he could stop it. That's not a sentence, that's a trap. The Consul's eyes stayed on him. Yes, the word was quiet, honest. It stunned Daniel more than any threat could have. The Consul continued, but it is also an opportunity. Daniel swallowed hard. For what? For you to prove, the Consul said, that your honesty is not merely noise, that your influence can be guided, that humans can exist inside the conquered without unraveling it. The 3 granddaughters stepped forward together, stopping at a respectful distance from the platform. Up close, Daniel could see small details. The way one of them held her hands too tightly, the way another watched the judges rather than him, the way the third looked at Daniel like she was trying to solve a problem no one had explained. The consul spoke again, formally now. By the authority invested in my office, and under the Concord's binding statutes, judgment is passed. Daniel Mercer of Earth is assigned to House Verley as guardian companion to heirs Sira, Ilian, and Maris. Daniel felt the words settle around him like invisible chains. He wanted to argue. He wanted to demand rights, appeal, time to think. But the hall did not feel like a place where time belonged to the accused. His advisor finally found his voice. Consul, with respect, the human government. The human government will be informed, the consul said. They will be offered safeguards, oversight, and contract terms. The binding will be lawful, transparent, and immediate. Immediate. Daniel's stomach tightened. One of the granddaughters, Sira, according to the consul, tilted her head slightly. Her eyes met Daniel's, and something passed between them that his translator could not touch. A quiet recognition that neither of them had full control of this. Daniel looked up at the judges. "Do I get a say in this?" The first judge did not answer. The Olshimmer judge did not answer. They all looked to the consul. The consul regarded him for a long moment. Then they said, "You already gave your say. It was every time you refused to be silent." Daniel's throat tightened again, but this time it was not fear alone. It was a strange, sharp awareness. He had come here thinking he was a small person caught in a big machine. He was learning that machines notice small parts when they jammed the gears. The consul rose. The attendants moved with them like shadows. "As of this moment," the consul said, "your judgment stands. You will be escorted to House Verley. You will be briefed. You will meet the heirs formally, and you will begin your service." Daniel's feet felt heavy, as if gravity itself had increased. As the guards approached, unarmed, polite, professional, Daniel forced himself to keep his voice steady. "Why me?" he asked the consul one last time. The consul paused just at the edge of departure. "Because," they said, "you are ordinary enough to be honest and stubborn enough to remain so." Then the consul left. The hall slowly emptied, whispers growing louder as the formal spell broke. Daniel stood for a moment longer, staring at the space where the consul had been. The three granddaughters remained nearby, silent, watching him with faces trained not to reveal too much. Daniel realized that everyone in this room had thought he was the one on trial, but the real test had just begun. And this time, the sentence was not about punishment. It was about what happened when a human was placed inside the heart of a perfect, fragile system, and told, politely, not to change anything. House Verley did not feel like a prison, but Daniel suspected that was the point. The transport carried him in silence from the conquered hall, gliding through layers of the city that shifted from public grandeur to private elegance. Outside the transparent walls, structures curved like living sculptures, built to impress without shouting. Light flowed instead of glaring. Everything was designed to calm, to smooth rough thoughts before they could form. Daniel sat upright, hands folded loosely in his lap. Across from him sat the three granddaughters of the consul. No one spoke at first. Sira sat closest to him, her posture straight, her gaze forward. She looked like someone trained to never give more than required. Ilian leaned slightly back, her attention drifting toward the moving city outside, eyes sharp and observant. Maris sat between them, hands folded carefully, watching Daniel as if he were a complex problem with many hidden layers. Daniel cleared his throat softly. "So," he said, then stopped. Three pairs of eyes turned to him at once. He felt suddenly aware that anything he said might matter more than it should. "So," he tried again, quieter, "I guess we're traveling companions now." The translator band warmed, and a brief pause followed as his words settled into their language. Maris spoke first. Her voice was calm but curious. "You do not appear angry." Daniel considered that. "I am," he said honestly, "but I don't see how being angry helps right now." Sira's eyes flicked toward him just for a moment. "Most people hide anger behind politeness." Daniel nodded. "That's also hiding. I'm not very good at hiding." Ilian gave a small sound that might have been amusement. "We noticed." That surprised him enough to smile. It slipped out before he could stop it. House Verley rose ahead of them like a quiet mountain, built into a natural curve of stone and glass. Gardens layered along its sides, green and silver plants flowing gently as if they breathed. Water traced slow paths through the structure, reflecting the sky. The transport settled into a private landing platform. Attendants waited, not guards, Daniel noticed. No visible restraints, no weapons. They bowed to the granddaughters and inclined their heads to Daniel, acknowledging him without warmth or hostility. Inside, the house felt vast but not empty. Hallways curved instead of running straight, leading the eye forward without revealing where they ended. Light came from hidden sources, soft and even. Daniel was shown to his quarters first. The room was larger than his apartment on Earth, with a sleeping platform, workspace, and a wide window overlooking the gardens. Everything was adjustable. Everything was prepared. It felt less like hospitality and more like anticipation. An attendant spoke calmly. You will have access to most common areas. Certain wings are restricted without invitation. Your presence is expected during shared meals and scheduled instruction periods. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Instruction periods? Yes, the attendant said. For the heirs and for you. Daniel sighed softly. Of course. The attendant left without waiting for a response. Later, Daniel joined the granddaughters in a shared space that seemed designed for conversation. No table divided them, seating curved in a loose circle. A faint hum filled the air, barely noticeable, like the house itself was listening. Sira sat first, graceful and precise. Ilian sprawled more casually, one leg tucked under her, the other bent. Maris waited until Daniel sat before taking her place. They studied him openly now. You are aware, Sira said, that this arrangement places us under scrutiny. Daniel nodded. I figured. You are also aware, Ilian added, that if we fail to meet expectations, responsibility will fall on you. That was made very clear, Daniel said. Maris tilted her head. And yet you remain calm. Daniel thought about that. His heart was still beating faster than normal, but panic had a way of burning itself out quickly in him. I'm not calm, he said. I'm focused. There's a difference. Sira folded her hands. Explain. Daniel leaned back slightly. Panic looks at everything at once and shuts down. Focus looks at the next step. And what is the next step? Ilian asked. Daniel looked at them one by one. Getting to know each other honestly. The word honestly seemed to echo a little. Maris smiled faintly. That may be difficult. Why? Daniel asked. Because, she said, we have spent our lives being instructed on what honesty should look like. Daniel frowned. That sounds exhausting. Ilian laughed outright this time, a quick sound that she seemed surprised by herself. She covered it with a cough. Sira's expression tightened slightly. You must understand, she said. We are not free to experiment. Our behavior reflects on the Consul, on the conquered. Daniel nodded. I get that pressure, not on that scale, but expectations are heavy everywhere. Ilian studied him. What were you expected to be? The question caught him off guard. Useful, Daniel said after a moment. Quiet, efficient, not noticed unless something broke. Maris leaned forward slightly. And you broke something. Daniel smiled thinly. Apparently. Silence settled, but it was different now, less rigid, more thoughtful. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Daniel attended briefings about conquered law, cultural boundaries, and acceptable influence. The information was dense but carefully delivered, as if someone had worked hard to make it digestible for a human mind. He asked questions. Some were answered. Some were noted and deferred. He spent time with the granddaughters during their studies. Lessons ranged from political theory to ethics to historical case analysis. Daniel was not asked to teach at first. He was asked to observe. That lasted 3 days. On the 4th day, during a discussion about leadership failures in a long-collapsed alliance, Maris hesitated over a response. The instructor waited patiently, but the silence stretched. Daniel watched her fingers tighten slightly. He spoke without thinking. You don't have to say what they want, just say what you think. The room went still. The instructor turned slowly toward him. Human Mercer, they said evenly. Guidance was not requested. Daniel felt the weight of every rule settle on him at once. He opened his mouth to apologize. Maris spoke first. I think, she said, voice steady but quiet, that the alliance failed because no one was allowed to admit uncertainty. The instructor paused, then nodded once. Continue. Afterward, in the corridor, Sira stopped Daniel. You intervened, she said. I did, Daniel admitted. I'm sorry if that causes problems. Sira studied him carefully. It may, but Maris' answer was stronger than expected. Ilian leaned against the wall nearby. You changed the pattern. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. That tends to happen when people are allowed to think out loud. Sira looked away, conflicted. That freedom is not without risk. I know, Daniel said gently, but neither is silence. That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the soft glow of the ceiling. He wondered how many invisible lines he had already crossed. He wondered how long before the house reported on him. The next morning, the granddaughters invited him to walk in the gardens. This, Daniel knew, was a test. The gardens were quiet, layered paths winding through plants that reacted subtly to movement. Some leaves curled away, others brightened. Ilian walked ahead, hands clasped behind her back. "You're changing things," she said without looking at him. Daniel walked beside Maris and Sira. "I'm not trying to." "That doesn't matter," Ilian said. "Intent is not always relevant." Daniel considered that. "True, but it does matter to me." Maris glanced at him. "Why?" "Because," Daniel said, "if I do know why I do something, I can't fix it when it goes wrong." Sira slowed her pace. "You assume it can go wrong." Daniel met her eyes. "Everything can." They stopped near a pool where light shimmered beneath the surface. Sira spoke softly. "We have been taught to avoid mistakes at all costs." Daniel looked at the water. "That explains a lot." Ilian turned. "Explain." "If you're never allowed to be wrong," Daniel said, "you never learn how to recover. So when something unexpected happens, it feels like the end of the world." Maris frowned slightly. "Recovery is not emphasized." Daniel smiled gently. "Humans mess up constantly. We got really good at apologizing, adapting, and trying again. It's not pretty, but it works." Sira's voice was very quiet. "And when it does not, then we learn something painful," Daniel said. "But we still learn." The garden seemed to listen. Later that day, Daniel was summoned to a private consultation with a conquered observer assigned to House Verley. The observer's tone was polite, their questions careful. "You have encouraged independent thought," the observer said. "I've encouraged honest answers," Daniel replied. "The distinction is noted," the observer said, "but independence may lead to divergence." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Divergence from what?" "From established norms." Daniel nodded. "That's usually how progress starts." The observer studied him. "You believe the conquered requires progress." Daniel met their gaze. "I believe stagnation is more dangerous." The observer did not argue. They simply recorded something and dismissed him. That evening, during a shared meal, Ilian asked a question that changed everything. "What happens on Earth?" she asked. "When someone in power is wrong?" Daniel paused, food forgotten. "Sometimes nothing," he said honestly. "Sometimes everything." Sira watched him closely. "That uncertainty would be unacceptable here." Daniel smiled faintly. "It's uncomfortable for us too, but it keeps the system awake." Maris leaned forward. "Do you think we are asleep?" Daniel chose his words carefully. "I think you've been taught to dream very specific dreams." Silence followed, deep and thoughtful. That night, as Daniel returned to his quarters, he realized something unsettling. No one had told him to stop. No warnings had come. No punishments, only observation. He suspected the Consul was watching, waiting to see what kind of human he truly was when placed inside a perfect, fragile structure. And for the first time since the judgment, Daniel understood the real weight of his sentence. He was not there to obey. He was there to demonstrate whether honesty, empathy, and flexibility could exist inside power without destroying it. The house was quiet, but beneath that quiet, something had begun to move. The change did not announce itself. It arrived quietly, the way cracks form beneath smooth surfaces. Daniel noticed it first in the pauses. During lessons, instructors began waiting a fraction longer before speaking. During meals, attendants hesitated before correcting posture or order. Small things, easy to miss. But Daniel had spent his life watching systems fail slowly before they failed loudly. The granddaughters noticed it too. One evening, as light faded across the garden terraces, Maris spoke while they sat together in the shared space. "They are listening more," she said. Daniel looked up from the tablet he had been pretending to read. "Who is they?" "Everyone," Ilian replied. She was pacing, restless energy in her steps. "Observers, instructors, even the house systems." Sira remained seated, hands folded. "That makes this more dangerous." Daniel nodded slowly. "Attention always does." Sira looked at him. "You do not sound surprised." "I'm not," Daniel said. "When something new enters a system, the system watches to see if it's a threat or a tool." "And which are we?" Maris asked. Daniel met her eyes. "That depends on what you choose to become." The words hung in the air. The next day, the summons arrived. Not for Daniel alone, for all four of them. The message was brief, formal, and impossible to ignore. A special review session had been scheduled before a conquered oversight panel. Attendance was mandatory. The purpose was listed as assessment of adaptive outcomes. Ilian read it twice, then laughed softly. "They finally noticed." Sira's expression was tight. They noticed earlier, this is when they decide what to do about it. Maris looked at Daniel. Is this your fault? Daniel did not dodge the question. Partly, he said, but mostly it's because you started thinking out loud. Sira inhaled slowly. That is not a defense. No, Daniel agreed. It's a reason. The transport to the oversight chamber was smaller than the one that had brought Daniel to House Verley, more enclosed, more deliberate. The walls were opaque this time. Inside the chamber, the panel waited. They were not judges, Daniel noticed. Not exactly. Their seating was flatter, their arrangement less ceremonial. This was not about guilt or innocence. This was about control. The consul was not present. That worried Daniel more than their presence would have. The lead overseer spoke first. House Verley has shown measurable deviation from projected behavioral models. Sira's voice was calm. Deviation is not failure. Not always, the overseer agreed. But it is instability. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Or adaptation. The overseer's gaze shifted to him. Human Mercer, your input is noted, but this review concerns the heirs. Daniel held their gaze. Everything concerns the heirs, including how they're allowed to speak. A pause followed, not hostile, calculating. Maris spoke next. We have not broken any laws. No, the overseer said. You have not. Ilian crossed her arms. Then what is the problem? The overseer folded their hands. You have begun to ask questions outside approved frameworks. You challenge assumptions instead of applying them. You encourage dialogue where instruction once sufficed. Daniel resisted the urge to smile. That was almost praise. Sira spoke carefully. Are those actions forbidden? No, the overseer said. They are untested. Daniel exhaled quietly. Everything new is. Another overseer leaned forward. The concern is not novelty, it is spread. Maris frowned. Spread of what? Of influence, the overseer said. Your discussions have been referenced by other junior members of the Conquered. Your phrasing has appeared in unrelated debates. Ilian's eyes widened slightly. We haven't spoken to anyone else. You did not need to, the overseer replied. Ideas travel. Daniel felt the weight of that sentence. He had known this moment would come. So what happens now? He asked. The overseer looked at him. That depends on the outcome of this review, Sira straightened. And what outcome is preferred? The overseer did not answer immediately. Stability, Daniel nodded. You keep saying that word, but you don't seem to agree on what it means. A murmur moved through the panel. One overseer spoke more quietly. Stability means predictability. Daniel shook his head. No, it means resilience. Predictability is just comfort. Silence followed, thicker this time. The overseer turned to the granddaughters. Do you feel constrained by this human's presence? Maris answered first. No, Ilian followed. No, Sira hesitated, then said, I feel challenged. The overseer raised an eyebrow. Explain. Sira took a breath. I was taught that challenge was danger. I am learning that it can also be preparation. Daniel felt a surge of something like pride, quickly tempered by caution. The overseer studied her. And if this preparation leads you away from conquered norms, Sira met their gaze, then perhaps the norms require review. The chamber went very quiet. Daniel sensed the shift immediately. This was no longer about him, or even about House Verley. This was about precedent. The lead overseer spoke slowly. Such statements carry weight, Sira nodded. I am aware. The panel withdrew for deliberation. The wait felt longer than it was. Daniel sat with his hands clasped, eyes on the floor. He had done this before, waiting for systems to decide whether he was worth the trouble, but never on this scale. Ilian broke the silence. If this goes badly, they'll remove you. Daniel looked up. Probably. And us, Maris added quietly. Daniel's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Sira shook her head. Do not apologize yet. The panel returned. The lead overseer spoke. The review has reached a preliminary conclusion. Daniel braced himself. Human Mercer, the overseer said, your role will be expanded. Daniel blinked. Expanded how? You will no longer serve solely as guardian companion, the overseer continued. You will be designated as a human liaison under provisional status. Ilian frowned. That sounds important. It is, the overseer said, and restrictive. Daniel let out a slow breath. Of course it is, the overseer continued. You will be required to present your methods before a broader Conquered assembly. You will explain the changes observed in House Verley. You will justify their continuation. Maris' eyes widened. You want him to defend us? We want him to explain the human effect, the overseer replied. Daniel felt the ground shift under his feet. This was bigger than he had expected, more dangerous too. "And if I fail?" Daniel asked. "Then the experiment ends," the overseer said plainly. Sierra's jaw tightened. "We are not an experiment." The overseer met her gaze. "Everything new is." The session ended without ceremony. As they left the chamber, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on all of them. Back at House Verley, Daniel retreated to his quarters for the first time since arriving. He needed space to think. He stared out at the gardens, mind racing. A broader assembly meant scrutiny. Debate, resistance. He would be speaking not just for himself, but for the idea that humans did not destroy order simply by asking why. A soft knock came at the door. Sierra entered, followed by Ilian and Maris. "We wanted to speak," Sierra said. Daniel nodded. "I figured." Ilian didn't bother sitting. "They're putting everything on you?" Daniel nodded again. "Yes." Maris stepped closer. "Is that fair?" Daniel smiled sadly. "Fair isn't really part of the equation." Sierra studied him. "You can refuse." Daniel looked at her. "Not without proving their fears right." Ilian cursed softly. "So what do you do?" Daniel took a deep breath. "What humans usually do." Maris tilted her head. "Which is?" "Tell the truth," Daniel said, "as clearly as possible and accept the consequences." Sierra was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Then we will stand with you." Daniel looked at her surprised. "You don't have to." "We choose to," Maris said. Ilian nodded. "If this ends, it ends honestly." Something settled in Daniel's chest then, something steady. The day of the assembly arrived sooner than he expected. The chamber was enormous, larger even than the Concord Hall. Delegates from dozens of species filled tiered seating that curved upward like a living amphitheater. Light shifted to accommodate countless visual needs. Daniel stood at the center alone, no granddaughters beside him. That, he realized, was intentional. The lead moderator spoke. "Daniel Mercer of Earth, you are invited to present your findings." Daniel swallowed, then began. He spoke simply. He talked about House Verley before his arrival, controlled, efficient, silent. He talked about what changed, not rules broken, but questions asked. He explained human habits, conversation, disagreement, shared problem-solving. He explained that humans did not assume authority was wrong, only that it should be questioned to remain useful. He did not praise humanity as superior. He described humanity as unfinished. "Asking why," he said, "is how we learn where systems are weak, not to destroy them. To strengthen them." Questions followed, hard ones. What if questioning leads to dissent? What if dissent leads to fragmentation? What if your species' methods fail with ours? Daniel answered honestly. "Then we adjust," he said. "Or we stop. Humans are used to being wrong. That's how we survive." A long silence followed his final words. Then something unexpected happened. A delegate spoke up, not from House Verley, not from the Consul's allies. "Human Mercer," they said, "what would you do if the Conquered decided your influence was too dangerous?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "I'd accept it," he said, "but I'd ask you to remember that danger isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's a warning that something important is happening." The assembly did not erupt. It did not applaud, but it listened. As Daniel left the chamber hours later, exhausted, uncertain, he understood something new. This was no longer about whether humans belonged in the Conquered. It was about whether the Conquered was ready to belong to a future where silence was no longer the highest virtue. And that decision had not yet been made. The waiting was worse than the speaking. Daniel sat in a quiet antechamber outside the great assembly hall, hands resting on his knees, trying not to imagine all the ways the Conquered could decide against him. The room was simple, smooth walls, soft light, no decorations. A place meant for reflection or for containment. He was not sure which. Time passed without markers. When the door finally opened, Daniel stood at once. An attendant gestured for him to follow. The chamber he entered was smaller than the assembly hall, but no less important. A selected council waited inside, representing many worlds. At the far end stood the Consul of House Verley. The granddaughters were there too. That alone told Daniel that something had changed. The Consul stepped forward. "Daniel Mercer of Earth," they said, voice calm and clear. "You have spoken before the Conquered. You have answered without deception. You have not attempted to elevate your species above others." Daniel inclined his head slightly. "That wasn't my goal." "We know," the Consul replied. One of the council members spoke. "Your presence has altered internal dynamics." Daniel nodded. "Yes, your methods introduce uncertainty." "Yes," another voice followed. "Yet they also increase adaptability." Daniel did not speak. He had learned when silence mattered. The Consul raised a hand. The Conquered was founded to prevent chaos. Over time, we mistook control for safety. That admission rippled through the room. The Consul continued. House Verley's heirs now demonstrate independent judgment, resilience under pressure, and cooperative leadership beyond projections. Sira stood straighter. Ilian's eyes were bright. Mari's hands relaxed for the first time Daniel could remember. The Consul looked at Daniel again. This outcome cannot be ignored. One council member asked, "What of the human?" The Consul answered without hesitation. "The human remains," Daniel's breath caught. "However," the Consul added, "his role must change." Daniel waited. "Daniel Mercer is hereby recognized as a human liaison to the Conquered," the Consul said. "A formal position, limited in number, defined by dialogue, not authority." Murmurs filled the chamber, not outrage, not approval, but something new, consideration. The Consul turned slightly. "The binding to House Verley is upheld, but no longer classified as containment. It is acknowledged as partnership." Daniel felt something heavy lift from his chest. Sira stepped forward. "Then we are permitted to continue as we are." The Consul looked at her with something close to pride. "You are permitted to continue becoming." That was the end of the session. No dramatic dismissal, no final warning, just a quiet shift in direction. Later, back at House Verley, the four of them gathered in the garden as light faded into soft colors. Ilian broke the silence first. "So, you didn't get removed?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Low bar, but yes." Mari studied him. "You changed the Conquered." Daniel shook his head. "No. I just showed them a crack they already had." Sira looked out over the water. "They listened." "For now," Daniel said, "listening is a practice, not a permanent state." Ilian laughed softly. "You're impossible." Daniel accepted that. In the weeks that followed, changes spread carefully. Other houses requested limited human advisors, not many, just enough to observe, to test. Daniel's role expanded slowly. Meetings, questions, long discussions where no one was entirely comfortable. He did not dominate them. He listened, he asked why. He admitted when he did not know. That, more than anything, unsettled the Conquered. One evening, as the Granddaughters prepared for their next stage of leadership training, Sira paused beside Daniel. "You were never meant to rule," she said. Daniel smiled. "Good, I'd be terrible at it," she continued, "but you were meant to stand where things are rigid and remind them they can bend." Daniel considered that. "Humans do that a lot, sometimes on purpose, sometimes just by existing." Mari's joined them. "Do you think the Conquered will truly change?" Daniel looked up at the stars beyond the garden dome. "I think it already has. The question is whether it keeps going." Ilian folded her arms, thoughtful. "And humanity's place in all this?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "We're not here to conquer or command or replace anyone." "Then why are you here?" Sira asked. Daniel smiled, quiet and certain. "To make the future harder to avoid." Above them, the lights of the city shimmered, ancient, powerful, and now just slightly less certain of itself. And for the first time in a very long time, the galaxy was awake.